The F256K from Phoenix Retro Systems is a wedge-shaped computer that gives us an alternative world of 8 and 16-bit computing with modern twists. Today I'll present a project I've been working on for a few weeks, programming its onboard MIDI chip with two goals in mind: getting acquainted with how this computer can deal with MIDI, and eventually making MIDI-based soundtracks for retro game programming. This video will be part of a series where I go over every single one of the sound features of this line of machine, because there's honestly a lot to cover. For today though, we start with an exclusive that can only be found in the very latest bleeding edge computers from Phoenix Retro, both the F256K2 and its cheaper single board F256 Junior 2, which both are set to ship soon. The second wave of F256 both have an onboard MIDI chip, the SAM2695 from Dream. This grants them synthesizer capabilities. On paper, you can plug in a MIDI controller into the MIDI in port using one of those older DIN5 MIDI cables. However, on its own, no sound will come out of it. We have to make a program that fetches and deals with that data. That's where my MIDI test app comes in. But first things first. It's relatively easy to send MIDI commands to the onboard MIDI chip and get immediate sound out of it. A single line of 3 basic instructions is enough to turn on a note. Everything is happening at a specific register address DDA1 on the K2 and Junior 2. This is where the data rests in a FIFO buffer known as first in, first out buffer. I was quickly able to put up a few minimalist tools just to get the hang of it, like this one that cycles through every audible note. With some help from the creator of these machines, I implemented her suggested algorithm and ended up pretty quickly with this test program. All of this happened in late October of 2024. I had just received my K2 replacement board meant to be used in the original K's case, so I could keep using my mechanical clicky blue switches keyboard. About a week later, the Phoenix community was gearing up for a Halloween game jam weekend. Make a simple game starting on Friday and see what we get late Sunday. Bringing previous assets and pieces of code was okay. The main goal was to have fun and foster new content for the platform and encourage each other in a fun, non-competitive event. I decided to jump right into MIDI programming to leverage and showcase my newest toy. I'll show a more in-depth video of what I ended up with, as well as play around with other people's projects on this channel. It was really fun and interesting. The participation was pretty high this time around. My efforts gave me a lot of experience that I could use to return to improve on my simple MIDI test app. Think of it as a tool for all K2 and Junior 2 owners to get acquainted with their new MIDI capabilities on their upcoming machine that could be part of the initial bundle of programs that comes with them. The first order of business was to allow the full range of all 88 keys that I have on my M Audio controller. So I extended an old basic program of mine I made last year called piano.bas. This one didn't use MIDI, but instead the pulse signal generator that can be found in both the K and K2, and that sounds like so. These are really vintage sounding square waves and bring you back into that early 80s period of time. From the graphic I had in my basic program, I scaled down the note widths to make it fit in a single full screen at 320 by 200 resolution. For the sap, I'm coding in good old trusty regular C. Someone in the community named Scott made a package that uses the LLVM-MOS C compiler and made it work with the F256 series. It's bundled with a nice install package and has batch files to make compiling and sending it off to the F256 through the USB port. It's a breeze for rapid prototyping. This is perfect because while I know my way around BASIC and I can dabble a bit in assembly, my experience lies mostly in classic C thanks to the time I spent in the 90s on my 386 and Pentium PCs. The next thing I wanted to do is to color every single white note with a different palette index white and every single black note the same way, so that when a specific note is pressed on the keyboard, the right type of white or black is changed into a new color. This technique is known as palette cycling, and it is super fast. It doesn't involve repainting individual pixels into a new color. It just involves swapping a trio of bytes for the color definition. For example, some old games use this technique to fade a daytime scenery into nighttime. I just use it to repaint some of my notes to indicate that it was a hit. Since not every future potential K2 or Junior 2 owner might have a MIDI piano synth on day one, I made sure that the test could still be performed with regular keyboard keystrokes. Spacebar will produce a note at the position of this red cursor line. You can move it left and right with the arrow keys. If you hold Shift left or Shift right, it moves a whole octave at once, if possible. And if you hold Alt and press the arrow keys, you can go through the hands in one go. Up arrow and down arrow are for selecting a different MIDI instrument. If you hold Shift or Alt, you can go quicker there as well. But instead of forcing you to hunt for the perfect instrument one by one, I added an instrument selection screen that pops into view if you hit F1. From there, browse your instruments and hear them right away by pressing space or pressing the notes on your controller. When you're happy, just hit Enter or F1 again and the choice will stick. At any time, you can let all the sound producing chore to the onboard SAM2695 chip. You can choose to also route the MIDI signal out of your MIDI out port and hear it produced elsewhere if you happen to have an external MIDI module. I'm lucky to have acquired this small tower of MIDI power over the last few years. I was also really tired of unplugging and replugging MIDI cables whenever I want to hear the difference in MIDI output. A few months ago, I designed a brand new MIDI selector. It lets me select a choice from several inputs. Right now, I'm using miscellaneous from my F256K2, but I also have a vintage Mac and vintage PC as possible choices. The other side acts the same way. I can choose to send it to any of three destinations. You can buy a 3x3 selector from my friends Joe at Joe's Vintage Computer Museum store at jcm-1.com. We tried to set a price that made sense for what it does, Note that it is much cheaper than a full-blown MIDI multiplexer or repeater that do way more than this. I thought I would corner this very simple need for a very cheap switcher. There's also a 2x2 option if that's enough for your needs. As luck would have it, there's a special code right now that you can enter at checkout, which is Holiday 2024, and you can get 10% off until December 13th. First, here's an example for an electric guitar sounding on the internal SAM 2695. And here's the same when you hear it from my Roland Sound Canvas 88. And then on the Kawai G Mega. And lastly, on the venerable MT32, which, to be fair, predated the general MIDI 1.0 standard of the others, but still acts like a MIDI-ish device with the same commands. The instrument names in the list won't match perfectly, but they're in the same vein. The MT32 is why I put in a keystroke that lets you choose if you want to play out of channel number 0 or channel number 1. The MT32 has a little quirk that it accepts MIDI data from the 2nd to the 9th channels after a power-up. There is a special combo that you can hit to force it to start its channel range from the 1st channel instead, but you have to know it and remember it. You have to press and hold master volume, then hit 5 and press 1 to confirm yes. It's easier to just let it get 2nd channel data right away from my app. If you cycle to the 3rd choice, my program will use channel number 9, known as the special 10th channel, where every note is a different percussion instrument, just like in the MIDI standard. By then, I figured my app was doing basically what I set out to do, but then I started to think about extra features. If you type X, you can activate what I call twin linking, both channels 0 and 1, and make 2 different instruments sound on the same notes. Not every combination is easy to hear though. Some are comical, like bird tweet and violin. I couldn't let feature creep stop at just this, so I added preset beats. I had to reinvent my own little pocket of standard MIDI music file to hardcode these notes, tie them to the proper channels and instruments, and prepare delays between notes in advance. I did not want to implement the full MIDI music file playback, because that's a way harder project where you have to keep track of so many more commands and such. Regardless, I've done that project a few months ago in Python, then succeeded into porting it in C for Vintage Max. And the next logical step is to bring it here to the K2 and Junior 2. Stay tuned for that. The last thing I worked on was to ensure every hard-coded note and delays could be bended to a different tempo that you tweak with the bracket keys. To perform plus 10 or minus 10 beats per minute jumps, hold shift as well. So there's many more things I could add, but I have to stop, smell the roses, and release something in a working state. I'm sure you've noticed there's a large black area in the top, and that is for future versions. I'll be eager to collect some feedback for this program first, and I also have some ideas on my own. I don't think I'm brave or foolish enough to devote myself to do a full sequencer because it would be a brutal, thankless task. Anything I'd make would be compared against so many options across the last decades like Cubase, Cakewalk, and any modern DAW program, and I'm just one person against legendary industry softwares. However, what I have in place lets me intercept MIDI data, digest it, possibly transform it before it's quickly sent to playback. This allows some fun creative programs, including games, or just some general artistic programs. Let me know what you think. Stay tuned for more content on this channel. Kudos for staying all the way through. Now is a good time as any to subscribe to the channel and leave a thumbs up or down. Take care and have yourself a wonderful day.